Welcome back to the Brother to Brother Show. I'm your host, K Mo. Thanks so much for joining us. Tonight, we're going to change it up a little bit and have a conversation about, we talk a lot about healing, understanding, and mastering relationships in our own lives. And today is a unique topic, and I have a perfect person to talk about that tonight. So we're talking about still standing, balancing grief, responsibility, and showing up for others. I'm going to introduce you to a good friend of mine, Brother Jason Campbell. How you doing, man?
What's going on, Brother Morris? How you doing?
I'm good, man. I'm good. So I want you just to I'm not gonna introduce you because I know you do a wonderful job. This is not your first rodeo on the show, so go ahead and do so.
Sure. Jason Campbell, affectionately known as J Cam. I run a global sports marketing agency based out of Chicago. We are in 4 different countries. We activate globally. I grew up in the Inglewood neighborhood in Chicago. And, with that comes a lot of expectations and also a lot of trauma and more unhealthy ways to navigate that trauma and navigate the world. I really found myself kind of going to college at FAMU with no tools, no emotional intelligence to even start with. And a lot of my peers came with more resources. So, really here to kind of just share my journey, especially recently with me losing my mother. But in the last 3 years, I've lost my grandmother, 2 aunts, and my mom. So, how do you really navigate those spaces in a healthy way? How do you continue to communicate with people that depend on you, the people that you depend on? I think this is a great topic. I'm a huge mental health advocate, huge on, grace, pace, and space, something I've coined and trademarked. Just giving yourself the grace, the pace, and the space, and following the GPS, and will always lead you to your destination. So, yep.
I'm glad to be here. Man. Thanks so much. That was great. So let's go into it. I have a few questions. I didn't really share them with you yet
Sure.
because of that, and it could be a little bit more, organic and genuine when we're having this type of conversation. So, one of my first questions, and my story. I've had a lot of death in my family. I was kind of forced into kind of the mental health space, and it's hard when you're going through it. And you look back on some of the things that you were going through with your personal relationships and romantic relationships, and understanding a lot of that stuff has an effect on how you deal with people.
100%.
And also, I can also say I had a lot of mentors and people around me to kind of put their arms around me. But I think the reason why I was able to kind of get through and manage it a little bit more, I think, than some of my peers now, because I'm the youngest out of 3 or 4. And so with that said, they didn't really know what I was going through because they were going through their own things. But I would say I was also very vulnerable with my space, which is not the norm. And I was able to allow people to come in who I trusted at the time to kind of give me those resources, to give me a hug, to give me support, so I can, or even that's the space to even talk about it. And I find these days we're coming to a place where the younger generation, or even people our age, they don't even talk about it. It's almost like they can't talk about it, or they don't want to talk about it, and don't feel like that's important enough to talk about so that they can heal in that space. So with your recent loss, and we've had some brief conversation about it. Well, how do you feel like you've balanced loss while still being present for others?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't that brief. I mean, we talk a lot, you and I appreciate that. I think one of the main things that I knew already, but that it's just interesting when you're going through it, when you lose your world, right? Like your mom is a lot of times is your world. I mean, I know people who grew up in the home with their mom and their dad, but like, losing their mom was just something. And it's something about that connection you have going through that person's womb. But like, what you're not prepared for is like friends
Mm-hmm.
acting weird, uh,
Mm. Mm.
not being able to deal or be there or show up for
Mm-hmm.
you.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Because they
Yeah.
don't have their
They
own,
don't know how to. Yeah.
emotions in place, and just the reality that, 2 weeks after the funeral, 99% of people stop checking on you, bro.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't even understand. You don't understand what your new reality is. I
Mm-hmm.
inherited my dang near 40-year-old brother,
Mm-hmm.
who I had already kind of been providing for while my mom was alive.
Right.
But he's still kind of navigating the space of finding himself,
Mm-hmm.
his identity, even outside
Without
of
it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
although I owned my mom's house for the last 18 years, the overall financial reality of like all of that's on me
Mm-hmm.
now. And what are my attachments to the property emotionally and financially.
Right.
And so it's an interesting journey to go on. I just feel like I have been preparing myself for this moment since I was 7.
Mm-hmm.
I told my mom, when she used to smoke around me, I just told her, like, you got to stop smoking.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I would appreciate if you didn't smoke around me. Now, I thought I was going to get a whooping. But she kind of stopped smoking in intimate spaces,
Mm-hmm.
car with that. And so I feel like just in the back of my head, and then later on in the front of my head, I knew that this was going to be the reality of her demise, unfortunately. But that didn't make it any easier. And so but I think the biggest thing is really just seeing who shows up for you
Mm-hmm.
and who does not, and being prepared for whatever emotions that you go through when people disappoint you,
Yeah.
especially in those times where you need them most. And that's just the reality of being a human.
Mm-hmm.
But it doesn't make it feel any better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I remember, I mean, you're still going through it, so let's not cut that short. I remember in that space, and I think the important thing is because I've had older people around me and they may have gone through that, they were able to provide a level of understanding and to check on me. And because I was the youngest, but still having me being a peer with the friends that I have, and even yourself, like, I tried to do a decent job. I know I don't do a great job, but decent job of checking on you during that time right
You do a
afterwards.
great job, bro.
But to that, you still want to give somebody space. And even when some of my other mutual friends that we have gone through that space, they shut down completely.
Yes.
They don't respond, they don't talk to you. And as a black man, like, you're kind of coasting in this space and moving along, and sometimes you have to check on people. I mean, I know you and I have had that conversation, but I struggle with it with some people because I'm like, well, hey, can I even get something back from you to let me know that you're good? And we've talked about that, and I've even tried to still working through and not trying to take it personal, because I've talked to guys who are maybe in their about 20 years our senior, who talk about this time in their life.
Yeah.
They talk about this time in their life and they're like, oh, I remember that. Like they have a lot of stuff going on. They're taking care of family. They're taking care of, wives, children, and things of that nature. And I know this is our season for that. But it still you don't want to get too out of touch, because sometimes I feel like with our generation, like we may take it too personal and we don't know how to come back from that. I think we'll do a good job of that, but there are some people out there who don't know how to handle that at all. So I always say, like, with that balance of loss, and it can just not just be a person, it could be lost in a relationship. I experienced that even in my experience with romantic relationships. It's hard to lose anybody that you've given, who you've trusted, who you've given a lot of yourself. I know you're even when we talk about certain things, we connect a certain way because of how we deal with people, but it still can hurt. As a man. And so I don't want to lose myself with giving to others, and because I try to be very specific of who I give to because of that situation. But at the same time, like, they say just to give, and you should look at it a certain way. But I think that's hard. I think that's a myth that people are saying, and they're just saying it like, no, men have feelings. Men do
Yeah.
feel, and a lot of times when they get ghost on you, when they don't say anything, they're expressing how they feel to you without you knowing it. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't think that people talk enough about the grieving process that you go through with platonic and romantic relationships.
It even could be at a job too.
Yeah, and a job. I mean, I literally, I won't say who it is, but I literally had this conversation with a brother that recently disengaged
Mm.
from a dream job that he had that he
Mm.
was at for 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And he is still
Hmm.
struggling with that, even rebounded less than 8 months later.
Right.
He's still struggling with that. And I said, hey, brother, you're grieving, bro. And your loss was just 8 months ago.
Right.
You
Right.
know what I'm saying? And although you've rebounded financially,
Hmm.
but you're still grieving from that loss.
Hmm.
So you need to treat it as such.
Yeah.
You need to be patient with yourself,
Right.
navigating that. When you see reminders of that loss, you need to give yourself space to digest that and not try to move on from that. That job was all you knew.
Mm.
It was so much a part of your identity, like a
Mhm.
platonic relationship, like a romantic relationship, and like a kinship that abruptly departs.
Right.
And so, like, we have to start looking at those sorts of moments as such, and being very, very sensitive to our emotional needs in those spaces as we navigate them. And the only thing, what I told that brother, is the only thing that's going to change that is time. But that is going to always, that loss is going to always leave an indelible mark on you. It's like
Absolutely.
a scar that you earned when you were 6 years old above your right eyebrow. And, it doesn't hurt as much as it did, when you were 6, but that reminder still is traumatic for you. And that's what I shared with him. And so we have to be mindful of that in professional, platonic, and romantic relationships.
So to that point, like, that goes into what I'm about to ask you. So, when loss hits, like, where do you even start? What do you feel like, again, even this, you're going through it right now. And that's why I thought you would be a good person to talk to about it, because I know I wouldn't come from a bad place with it. And I think that it's good for people who are even going through it to kind of express how they feel, to give others who don't have any type of outlet or don't know where to start. And I'm not saying that that's a perfect space to be in, or even you have the perfect solution. However, I think that for somebody like you, and maybe myself now, I even, I remember when we talked about my loss a couple years ago, and you were like, the first thing you messaged me was, you need to go to therapy.
Yep.
Like, it was hands down, and I didn't wait on it because I know we had these conversations, and I knew I needed to. And I feel like that to me is the hardest part, is you even explaining that to somebody, because I think the average person is going to stumble on trying to go to therapy. Like, I took hours on end going and trying to find something immediately because I knew I was not myself.
Yeah.
So what do you think that how do people start that process?
Yeah,
like,
well,
go elementary with it, because I know I was able to, and you sent it to me, but it wasn't like you sent me any therapist. But because I knew kind of how to get that, and I called and I was on the phone. So what about somebody who doesn't know how to do that and is grieving, and what does that feeling look like to you?
Well, so now I remove any not boundaries, but challenges. So now I actually send you the link
right
to look for the therapist, and it has a filter that identifies your insurance, what areas that you want to work on, all of that. But for me, I just told a young man this today, super solid cat. Like, he just got back into the church, and because he had experienced a hardship. And I said, well, brother, you can't wait to get in alignment spiritually and emotionally and physically when you in your storm. Like you have to prepare for your storm. So I tell young people all the time, when they're like, well, I don't really have nothing going on. Like,
oh yeah, they just keep on living. My grandma used to say, it's coming.
Yeah. Oh, don't worry. You're a black man in the United States.
Yes.
Your storm is coming, and there are multiple of them. It becomes hurricane season.
Right.
As you get older. So I said, I want you to have all of your pieces in place to be able to weather that storm. So that's not only spiritually, if you're spiritually, whether you're a religious person or not, but spiritually, also emotionally. So therapy, 100%. But also physically. I worked out on the morning of my mom's funeral. You know what I'm saying? Like, and it settled me and balanced me so much. And people, when I walked in the gym, because I'm a part of a strong gym culture, pro train in Pilsen, and it was like, 10 of the brothers was there. They was like, what you doing? And I was like, oh, I ain't skipping this workout. So I did yoga and I worked out that morning, and it had me so centered. And so, like, if you're able to muster up the gumption to continue your physical regimen through this, it works wonders. If you have yoga or other things and meditation, and if you're able in a space to be able to continue those things, do those things. And if you do have a relationship with a higher power, or you are religious or just spiritual, like, tap into all of those things. And then therapy is huge. Like, understand. And like, my family got hit back to back. Like, my mom passed, and 4 days later, her younger sister passed of pancreatic cancer. And instead of it being like, oh my God, like, we're getting, what is happening? It was sobering. I was like, oh, this is not personal. I was like, this is not a personal thing that's happening to me. This is a thing that everybody has to go through. And I stopped thinking about myself. And even my mom passing, and I started to call my cousins like, hey, are y'all good? Do y'all need anything? And that kind of helped me with this entire space. The other thing that people don't talk about, which is really, really hard for me, is I hate the attention during, like, death, and I hate the attention during praise. And that's something I worked through with my therapist. But, like, having to being able to relinquish some of those responsibilities of the funeral off to my cousins and to my friends, and a couple of my mentors showed up in a big way. It was so hard for me the first 5 weeks trying to manage all of that. No, what's the food gonna look like? No, I got this. No, I'm gonna reach out to this person. No, I'm gonna I was just like, stop. Like, you have to allow people to help you. Spent your entire life pouring into others. Allow these people to pour into you in whatever way possible. We started a scholarship in my mom's name that goes to creatives in Chicago and elsewhere. That was another way that really helped that. And my line brothers and my friends and our mutual friends showed up in a big way for that. And so, like, those are the things that you're not prepared for, but, like, those are good remedies to try to start with. But some of us are not going to be able to bring ourselves to that table emotionally, spiritually, and physically. And that's okay. And that's when you just have to sit through this entire storm and be aware of your feelings and where it's put you.
Right. I can remember my father passed, and it was during COVID. And I think it was in August, and because stuff was happening so fast with COVID, I had to work. We were moving around trying to figure things out. I didn't really get a chance to sit down and think about it until I actually went on a trip. And I booked a trip maybe 2 weeks after he passed, knowing that I was so busy, I wouldn't be able to, like, really think about it. And I think it was Thanksgiving when I went on a trip, and I really just I sat down and processed. And I think me processing and actually even thinking about it, praying, understanding, memories, crying, and then having my own space to myself to do that by myself, because I actually went by myself. it was good, and I was able to look back at it and say, I was able to go, and during that time was nobody really there, so that was even better.
Yeah.
But it was a space for me to kind of heal, read, and do those things, and I don't think a lot of people actually do that type of stuff. And I
Yeah.
don't know if it's because we're getting older and we're allowing ourselves to feel these things, because as you know, there's so many different things that we are burdened with. But I think it's very, very important for folks, for guys especially, to have some type of peace and sanity so that we can be able to show it for others. I remember as a mentor told me about a couple of years ago, he said, everybody doesn't get this burden. He was like, he gives it to you. God gives you these types of things like losing parents or these type of things because he knows that you're strong enough.
Yep.
And that's hard to hear when you're actually going through it.
Sure.
Especially for me, I was 27 when I lost my mom, but I really lost her years before that. And a lot of times people didn't even know I was going through that type of stuff. And I held it in, but I understood that once I let it out and released and knew kind of where your brother is at that time, I was trying to figure out what that looked like for me later on, even though, to your point, I knew this was going to happen at an earlier age.
Yeah.
I know we talked about the mask before, and so a lot of people wear the mask, but how do you feel, or, in your experience and just talking to other people, how do you, check that between you coping with wearing a mask versus you healing?
Yeah, I mean, man, like what you talked about.
Like, how do you know that you're doing that? Because some people may think that they're coping with it, like you just said, because they don't have all those things. They're thinking, I'm managing this, but they're really wearing a mask.
Yeah, I mean, that's what you talked about prior was just like the development of emotional intelligence and what that looks like, right? I think back to like it was August and I had a ton of stuff going on business wise. I was renovating a new condo, and I just was like, I was kind of going back and forth with my cousin on whether or not I was going to attend his birthday party in Greece. And so, I just made the decision that I was going to go. And I was sitting in the other room from my mom doing some work. And she just woke up and was like, Jason. And I was like, how's she even know I'm here? She was like, go ahead. You can go on without me. Now, mind you, I never mentioned to her a trip or anything like that. And I was like, I'm sitting here with you. I'm chilling. And she was like, no. Go ahead. I'm going to be with Granny. Go ahead without me. And I was just like, wow. And so I did go on my trip knowing, though, in my heart that my mom was going to probably pass away while I was gone. And she did. And then the irony of the situation was like that her last words was my name. And that's something that was told to me. And, I think that it's super important to manage the guilt that some people that would have bestowed upon some people. So when you talk about like wearing the mask, I mean, for me, I didn't want to be that person to just be continuing to say, nah, I'm cool. No, I'm straight. I believe vulnerability and transparency is power. And so people depend on me to be the strong person, but it was very important for me to show vulnerability to myself. And even when I talked about like just my first Thanksgiving experience,
right?
I was cool. I was gathering. I'm gathering the food, packing it up. I'm about to go divvy it out to the people that I always feed for Thanksgiving. I was like, all right, I got mom's plate ready. And I was like, damn, like, mom not even here anymore. And instead of powering through that type of stuff, I just sat in it, and I disregarded. Oh, I need to be at such and such house, and I need to be at such and such place. I got to hit all these spots. I just sat there for an hour and a half, 2 hours, and just digested what that meant, around the holidays and how that felt to me. So like for some people, they believe that that's coping. But for me, like I am recently in the last 6 years being okay with being seen in a myriad of different ways. And that was one from a grieving standpoint, that I wanted to be seen. And through me being seen and being vulnerable and removing the mask, I received so much love and guidance that I did not know I needed from people by saying, nah, I'm not okay. And people that you least expect, that was giving, I think, a crackhead. I just was transparent with him. He was standing on the street and he said something to me and like, well, loss is a gain. And I was like, what does that even mean? And then I was like, at first I tried to dismiss him. And I was like, wait, that was a bar. And so, removing the mask it was so important to me and so important to people, because that allows yourself to be vulnerable, but it also allows people to show up for you when you need to. And when you're going through this, bro, and you're dealing with the reality of people not showing up for you
right.
expected to,
right,
and you need all of the heroes in the moment that
and I think that's one thing that it allows you to see who's really in your quarter, for one. 100%. It allows you to see who really is for you, but it also allows you to understand where people are emotionally. So a lot of that awareness that people talk a lot of things business wise, professional, but when things like that happen and they don't have anything to say, you understand it because they may not have had that type of loss, but there is a level of emotional intelligence that you should have. And sometimes people have nothing to say, but it's not about what they say, it's about what they do as well. So you just without saying anything, you can still do stuff. So I would say that. And then also I think that goes back to the preparation that we've talked about. You and I both, you've got me about my yoga. That's going to be a struggle for me, but the health piece, the eating, the working out, the meditation, the praying, the treating people correctly when you're working with them, trying to do a little bit more for those people, but also not giving all of yourself to it, because sometimes when you give too much and they don't give, then that's when you hurt even more. And I've been there. I think that even when I was going back to what you were saying, and I remember our conversation and going, I think if you were doing something for your mom, I want to explain exactly what it was, but you said it made you feel extremely good to do that because you had never done that because you're a man. And because of that, I think you're able to give her everything that you could have given her there. And I think the problem is a lot of people have guilt because they haven't been there. They have guilt because they can't do it again. They have guilt because they should have said something to somebody in a polite way, whatever the case may be, and they can't come back from it. And that's where the hurt and reflection comes. That's hard to kind of get through things a little bit more. And I wish we could be like that and be perfect people. However, I think that's what makes it harder for healing. And that's a part of the healing that some people can never get back. But I think if you're able to have somebody like that around, and it's a blessing to do that. And it was hard for me. I mean, I know I didn't do as much for my mother because I couldn't. I couldn't physically. I couldn't at the time. I knew I couldn't. My sister are always in a great space, but I will always respect my sister for being strong enough to do that for our mother. And I had to tell her later on, because I didn't even know I was doing it. I said, I could not be there because I had to go back to work, and for me to even function, you didn't know this, but I'm crying in the break room, or I'm having those nights by myself and things of that nature. So I was feeling as well, but we're so used to wearing a mask because we don't know who's really out there. And at that time, I didn't build up my circle of people yet. And so I think that's a part of it too. You got to get out there and really get a good group of people around you. And that takes time too. So I think once you're doing all the things for yourself, that's a part of we talked about the working out, the eating and things of that nature, having those genuine people around you to relinquish some of that stuff off too.
100%. I mean, I think it was such a challenge for me because my brother was doing the best he can with what he could. Just trying to, what I told my aunts, because I've worked in this space, which is probably another reason why I understood just the entire transition process. But being a caregiver for somebody, your loved one and your mom, is one of the most difficult things in the world. You often feel like you aren't doing enough, and negotiating that guilt is something that's really strong, and some people never come out with a positive balance in that negotiation. But you know, like I spoiled my mom. You know, the activity that you were talking about, like I would give my mom facials and you know, bathe her and moisturize her and all sorts of things. I even invested in some expensive meal prep stuff so that she could eat. You know, but most people believe that guilt is led by their lack of, you know, ability to, you know, show up for that person like they really wanted to. But at the end of the day, you know, you have to be okay with understanding that, you know, most people don't get closure, and closure not guaranteed, nor a real thing. Most relationships end abruptly, and you have to be okay with that disconnection. You know what I'm saying? Like a dropped call, you got to be okay with it. And so,
but to your point, what you said, the crackhead outside, he said it's a blessing too, to be able to be there, and that could have been a blessing for you to actually, you know, do that stuff for that person.
100%.
That's hard. You know, it's hard, but it's also a blessing.
It was very difficult because I'm the breadwinner, and so, you know, I was leaving Formula One meetings and going to take care of my mom just to try to give my brother some respite.
Right.
Because he was living it, you know, even when she was like super verbal, you know, he'd be screaming up the stairs for him to come down and change her, or feed her. And that's tough. It was super tough. I acknowledge that. And, you know, there was a point where we were consistently, he and I were butting heads, and I had to stop. And I said, I'm the person who has the most clarity on the moment right now. Although I'm trying to navigate this on my own too, I'm the older brother. So what do you need, Nick? Despite I think how wrong you are, how offbeat you are, what do you need? And so my objective turned from, you know, focusing on me to focusing on him. So if I was going to get something to eat, Nick, have you eaten yet?
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Have you showered today? You need to go make a run. I have a couple of hours between my meetings. Do you need to go make a run? And so, but that, you know, it's challenging, man, and nobody prepares you on how to deal with this. And there is no wrong or right way to deal with it. You can only take these caveats and these tips, and hopefully they work for you. You know, but maybe they won't. But the start of it is conversations like that. And we have to, as brothers, hold these conversations and continue conversations. A friend of mine, mom just passed. Let's just say I have a relationship. I don't want to put that totally. I have a professional relationship with his dad as well, and I know his significant other too. And so I, you know, I would ask him. I've asked him consistently, like, you need anything?
Right.
And I talked to the dad, and I talked to his significant other, and they like, yeah, he need this, and I'm like,
right.
I will constantly follow up in that space, but again, nobody tells you how to navigate 100 people calling you a day asking you, do you need anything? You know, so that's because
sometimes you don't know what you need.
You don't.
You don't know what you need, and so showing up I mean, I've had, I had 2 losses. The person I told you they lost their, you know, a significant other, and then it was a loss for our situation too. So it was 2 losses for me, even though I wasn't connected with that person like that. I was being there. I was the person being there, and so that is difficult. But I also feel like, you know, nothing in life is just because. He has to give it to you because he knows you can handle it. And so I think you have to go through some of these sacrifices so you can also appreciate what you have a little bit more as well. Let's switch it a little bit, and I got 2 more questions for you before you wrap up. What have you learned during this time?
Biggest well about myself is that you're gonna go through loss, and it's not personal. Everybody, you know, if you're lucky, you'll lose your parents and your
Mhm.
parents don't lose you.
Right.
And that's luck. I learned that I did maximize and cherish every moment with my mom, and I used that to fuel how I engage other people that I love.
Mhm. Mhm.
So people be like, "Man, you're intense." I'm like, "Yeah, because if I rock with you, like I'm gonna
Mhm.
lock
Yeah. Yeah.
in."
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? But I think the biggest thing that I learned um, is that people are going to be people, and they're going to always disappoint you, no matter their
Mm.
proximity to you
Mhm.
or their tenure with you.
Mhm.
And I had to navigate that in a real way, due to some people not showing up
Mm.
how I expected them to.
Mhm.
And it was, we were talking to people that I do business with, that I put thousands of dollars in their
Mm.
pockets in their restaurant, and I was kind of like, yo, I need some, food for the repast, and I'm expecting them to be like, oh, we got you.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, we'll give you 5% off. I was
Mm.
like, bro,
Mm.
I spent 20 grand with y'all a
Mm.
year,
Mm.
and so that was just like a disappointment. And then friends just not showing up
Mhm.
how you expect them to, or how you even showed up for them in
Mhm.
their
Mhm.
time of
Mhm.
need. That's the biggest thing. Like,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
you've
They
been through
forget.
this,
That's
bro.
crazy. Yeah.
You've been through this, and I
Mhm.
showed up in a major way
Mhm.
for
Mhm.
you, and
Mhm.
you showed up small.
Yeah.
And that's unfortunate, because I've known
Mhm.
you a long time. So those are the things that I say I learned. But man, the biggest thing, man, is I'm resilient.
Yeah.
I am as resilient as I thought I was.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
I feel impeccably encouraged and confident through that.
Mhm.
People look
It
at
prepares you for other things in life. Like some of the stuff that I know we've all gone through stuff in college, especially you and I, but
Mhm.
also like to a, something like that, it's nothing that can really like affect you as much anymore. You can go through relationships. I've gone through relationships, and they've been bad, but preparing you for something like that where it doesn't go away. And I'm gonna say it doesn't go away at all. When I say
Yeah.
don't go away, because you can have a relationship with somebody, but losing somebody that gave you life and
Mm.
has who protected you from a lot.
Yep.
That person, it's always, you're never gonna forget their birthday. You're never gonna
Yeah.
forget Mother's Day. You're never gonna forget
Yeah.
Father's Day, and you're never gonna forget certain things. And holidays every year, it's gonna be a situation every
Yep.
year. You can
Multiple
probably
times
get
a year.
past that with a significant other or a relationship that somebody breaks your heart. But as far as those people like that, that is definitely something that keeps you going. And also for me, and I express to you some of the things that I do um for my mother's birthday every year. I take myself out to eat and just sit in it. And a lot of people don't get that because they still have their mothers. But like I said before, my grandma said to me a long time ago, she said, if you don't understand something, it's you're trying to explain it to somebody, they're not getting it, you just tell them, just keep on living. You'll
Yeah.
see.
Yeah.
You'll see. It's gonna hit
That's one
you.
of my favorite
Mhm.
adages, so to speak,
Right.
euphemisms. Yeah.
Yeah. So last thing, how do we educate others with this, you think? I know we're having this
And
conversation about it, but how do you feel like we can educate others and continue? I think for you, and I'm not gonna speak for you, but for myself, one of the things you just said was, now I'm a tool for others.
mhm.
I was already a tool for others, but I use this as a platform to talk to people when they're going through it and showing up for them, because I know how it feels. I've been on that other side. I know how it, even though it was 16 years ago, I still remember those people
Yeah.
who were there. I
Yeah.
remember them like, and some of them I don't even talk to, but they asked me to help them move. Either I'm not helping them move or I'm sending them some money to move, because during that time, that was one of the hardest times in my life. I say this, and I'm gonna leave it alone and talk about education. I lost my job, my mother, and my car within 2 weeks,
Whew.
and that was the hardest thing in my life. Now, thank God that I had a job. I went into a job, Jason. I took about an hour off to go in for an interview, drove back to the job
Mhm.
that I was currently at. Not now, but what I was currently at that
Yep.
present time.
The previous job.
Talked to a friend of mine, said, hey, no, got a phone call when I got back, said they want to offer you the job. Was gonna think on it, give me 24 hours. Went into the job, got fired. I got fired from that current job. And I think I was talking to somebody before I went in. It was like, and I called that same person right afterwards, and they said, I guess you're taking that job. And it was the best thing that happened to me.
Yeah.
So I think, we don't have control over that type of stuff. And I think I've heard a lot of people lately, David Banner even said it, like the thing that is super hard for you that you're trying to resist is probably the thing that you need to work on and understand to make you a better person, as opposed to resisting it and throwing it underneath the rug, because it's going to help you get to where you need to be.
Always. I mean, always, brother. Like, man, that's super important. But a lot of people aren't that self-aware and don't want to work on the things that make them uncomfortable. But lack of comfort is growth.
Yeah.
People have to understand that. A lot of times, bro, and I've talked to several therapists about that, a lot of times we tend to hold on to grief a little bit longer because that person was a crutch for us, emotionally, financially, most of the time in our community. So like that makes it that much harder. Who's gonna bail me out when I make bad decisions?
Right.
And the answer is you, and you have to make better decisions.
Always you.
And there's nobody coming to save you. No one. You have to make better decisions. But how do we, amplify this message? I've already thought about it. One, I think, obviously with the scholarship that we created for my mom, that's a way to keep her legacy alive. So thinking of creative ways to keep that person's legacy alive within the space and the scope of what they do. But ultimately, like, we have to educate the masses. I'll be very transparent with you. So my mother, the last like 9 months or so, she wasn't really able to like manage and facilitate her finances. So her accounts kept going into the negative. And so I put, about $5,000 in her account so that, things can just be taken out as they go. And I'm thinking like, I know this is the end, but I'm the power of attorney. So I'll be able to get that money out the account. No problem. Right? Wrong. So banks, when your loved one passes, that power of attorney is eroded. So you're not able to access their accounts. And within 2 weeks, whatever money that is in that account is sent to the state. And then the state reaches out to you to say, hey, you're the beneficiary, there's money in that account. And so you're talking to a person that has been on top of all the end of life stuff, bills, to irrevocable trust, to making sure all the things, life insurance. And even I didn't know that, you lose those things. So to your point, education is key. Being intentional with that education and being a willing partner with different brands. I'm talking to Chase and Bank of America and Wintrust right now about doing some education in our communities to talk about what does a power of attorney look like, what are your rights, what do you need to know, but also life insurance. I know a brother that has at least $125,000 worth of shoes and no life insurance. That's ridiculous. So we have to, but in our community, and I think it's ethnic communities across the board, not just Black folks, they don't like to talk about as religious as they are.
Right. No, 100%.
And so we have to be very steadfast in having these conversations with our loved ones, because, if we don't, these things can end up in probate court. I've seen people fall out over a freaking toaster. Or a 10-year-old toaster. Sisters fell out over a 10-year-old toaster. And so we really have to identify these things, amplify education, and work, to really help the community understand what their goals are, what their rights are. Have the conversation while your loved one is healthy, despite their them being giving you pushback on the topic. Like we have to do that, because there's so much of a wealth transfer. And like, I didn't inherit any money. I inherited debt.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So like, you know, we really have to be on point and be leaders in the space and thought leaders in the space about communicating financially what it looks like during death, emotionally, spiritually, and physically, and how that shows up in you with stress and all the other different things.
Absolutely. Man, that was well said. I'm gonna end it on that. So I appreciate you, man. If you want to talk about your platforms before we get out, you can.
Yeah, man, I'm Cam CEO on Instagram. I have a yoga company, meditation and life coaching called Axon Yoga. We do yoga every Sunday. I do it every day. I do it all over the world. It's essential to tap into my inner self, and it was so important helping me through the topic of discussion, which is grieving and death and showing up for others. And so I think it's just important for people to be communicative and let people know, you know, how they're feeling and remove the mask and all the things that you talk about all the time, brother, on your platform. So important. So thank you for having me.
Appreciate it, man. Until next time, we are the Brother to Brother Show. Peace.